Haiti World History. We're going to do a little lecture today about Pearl Harbor. So I'm going to share my screen here and go to the presentation I have for you here today. And so here we go. Pearl Harbor, a date which will live in infamy. You may hear that term and that saying from time to time. It's very famous, and we'll find out about it later. So Japan initially conquers much of China and the Pacific Islands. You can see here on this diagram that the acquisition until 1932 was this area here. Originally Japan, becomes Japan, and then slowly they start occupying more and more islands in the areas around Japan. The Lend-Lease Act of March 1941, where they gave presidential power to sell or lend to any war materials that is in the defense or interest of the United States, a pledge to support the Allies and promotion of democracy. Basically, this gave the President of the United States the power to decide what was in the best interest of the United States, and that pledge went to the Allies. Japan and the United States clash a little bit. Japan advances into French Polynesia and begin moving on. And the U.S. responds by not selling anything that could be war-related to Japan. Japan sees this as almost an act of war, interference in their acquisition of new territories. So the tensions really begin to happen between Japan and the United States. Japan and the United States have some talks about tensions and non-aggression. General Tojo Hideki doesn't agree with peace with the United States. While the discussions are going on with Japanese Ambassador Nomura, who was in Washington, D.C., scheduled for a peace meeting with the Secretary of State Hull, Hideki already had plans in action to attack Pearl Harbor. So whether Nomura knew about this or if it was a smokescreen or not is not clear, but to this day, some say that he knew what was going on and some say he didn't, so we don't know. And then on December 7th, 1941 at 7:53, the first bomb hits. The attack is beginning, and it's over at 9:55. So basically 2 hours was the attack. This is how Pearl Harbor looked right before the attack. They called this this area here Pearl Harbor, as you know, and along here is where our massive warships were. And so normally warships don't line up like this when they are docked because they're sitting ducks. And that's exactly what happened. So as you see here, the Arizona, which is very famous and still lays at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. I've been there, it's very solemn. It was right here when it was attacked. And then so here's what it was. There's 353 aircraft, 40 torpedo planes, 234 bombers, 79 fighters, 4 cruisers, 35 subs, 9 oilers, 2 battleships, and 11 destroyers. This was the first wave you see here in blue on the attack on Pearl Harbor. Then an hour later, a second wave. Why was this so strategic for Japan? Well, their first wave happened. Then they wanted to wait a little bit so that they knew that rescue crews would be out there so they could attack those that are on the rescue missions. There are a few air bases that were also attacked. Those had happened even before so that the planes could not take off and have an air fight with the aircraft that Japan had. Here's some photographs of the devastation that you can see all through here. It was a terrible result. This is not an actual thing. I think this is a recreation. This is actual over here. This is a recreation. And this is color added to a black and white photo down here. All in all, casualties, 208 Navy men or seamen were killed, 710 were wounded. Army, 218 were killed, 364 wounded. Marines, 109, which is a division of the Navy. And then civilians, civilians, 69 were killed and 35 wounded. All told, over 3,300 people were killed that day. Very devastating. The USS Arizona battleship that was on Battleship Row, which we'll go back to here, Battleship Row, they call it. The Arizona was here, and it was sunk. And this is the memorial that you can go to and see. 1,179 men were on board, and 1,102 are entombed. They died on the ship and remain in the ship. They never have taken the the dead out, and therefore this is a memorial gravesite that you see here. It still leaks oil to this day. I was there, 27 years ago, and when I was there, it was pretty much silence the entire time when aboard this memorial and looking on, because you know that you're sitting on top or standing on top of graves. Let me move myself out of the way here. Here's where they show all the devastation and things that were lost. The red are sunk. Undamaged ships. These were all ships that were being fixed in some way, were undamaged. So 19 ships were destroyed, 8 battleships, and numerous aircraft, and 3 aircraft carriers were at sea. No aircraft carriers were sunk during this. And they were all at sea doing some operations. So we were able to retaliate quickly. This was about a third of our fleet. We were able to fix our fleet and become the naval power, superpower during World War II, just a year later. Japan, why did they do this? Why did Japan attack? Well, you see Hawaii is here. Japan wanted the natural resources that Hawaii had. They also wanted, they felt that U.S. had restrictions on Japan, and they thought this was a way to keep the United States from entering into the war, believe it or not. But this actually was the catalyst to get the United States finally into World War II. But you can see the strategic position for both the United States and Japan. It's about 3,300 miles away from North America, and it's about 4,500 miles away from Japan. But it also, all these islands down in here, it's a strategic naval position. And so Japan thought that if they could deter the United States from entering the war by attacking their naval ships and not allowing them to enter into this war in the Pacific, that perhaps Japan could continue to expand. The United States responds the next day in a declaration of war. And there's a video that's attached here I'd like you to watch. Aside from what I'm giving you right now as time, but you have this PowerPoint, and you can watch it in just a minute. There's also another video to watch after this. It's a documentary if you have time. It's about 45 minutes long. But please watch this video. It's the declaration of war of the United States against Japan. And so that's your lecture for the day, and I'll see you at Zoom.